You want to set up a solo tone more. Now you might use a Strat, and I just have my telly, but I would bring a Strat. I got a 65 Strat, or a Les Paul, or a 335 with a humbucker, or some kind of Gibson humbucker for a solo, and you might use that for the solo and like a telly or a Strat or something for, or a Gretsch, something with like P90s, if they're quiet, for just like chordal things.
Right.
But I might use this sound more for. Now this has got a little run, a little treble on it. For a solo, I might use more of that sound. Right
Something
there.
with the tube string.
I'll use a compressor. And I'll use a compressor if there's single coil pickups.
But no.
Sometimes if I use a Les Paul and a humbucking, the compressor just sucks it
Really?
too much. It doesn't seem to jump out as much and speak with the tone.
Gotcha.
Now, with a single coil like a Strat or Telly, I'll kick in a compressor and run it.
Looks like you just barely got your compression.
Yeah, and
on.
I don't need that much because if I'm taxing the amp some, it's already going to sustain. Standard rock tone for solo or rhythm. And that's not too overboard for a country record these days. Like Rascal Flatts,
Right.
That's kind of where it's going. So you get that. So I'm using the Marshall, which might give it a more of a low end push,
Right.
if you're playing rhythms. Maybe no delay on that, just like a. So you got that big beefy.
Right.
Definitely something totally different than Alan Jackson or Dwight Yoakam or something like that. And also, just real quick on if you were doing sort of a pop country record or pop, you'd use a delay. Now I got it set on. You always, now if I want to, this is mono delay, and that's probably what I use most. I usually run mono unless it's
Right.
sometimes stereo, but usually mono.
If it's stereo, do you think the producer would generally run it at the board, or
Well, they just run me 2 tracks.
would they?
Yeah, and I would handle my effects unless
Okay.
they suggest it. We want to have the freedom with that later, so don't print any effects.
Right. And then they would add it.
Record any effects, they couldn't take them away.
Right.
But usually, if it sounds right and it's got the character of the song, we'll record it with those delays on. Like right now, it's like an analog delay there with a little bit of a mod feature on this line 6.
Right.
So hear the little modulation of it. It's almost cooler than a chorus because the chorus gets a little too cheesy sounding and cloudy. Sometimes the delay, you still get the pure tone, but the delays then
Kind of.
pitch bend it a bit.
Right.
It makes it cool. So, and then depending on the song, this is cool because you can always tap in the tempo.
Right.
And then of course, by holding the button down, it'll lock it in.
Right.
So you can. If you were playing a muted part, if the tempo was like a straight H, that's the quarter notes. You'd be.
Right.
And then you could,
So right there, that's
you
just
could
delay.
go ba 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 ba. That's a triplet to it. So
Right.
of course you can do that.
Right.
So you're setting it up for triplets. So.
Right.
One, two, three, four. kind of set in triplets. You know, da, 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 one, and 2, and 3, and 1, and 2. It's triplets, but they're straight eights.
Right.
So, you know, you can do a lot with delays, and that's what's cool about this.
So that there was no chorus at all, though, right? That was
No, it
just
had a pitch bend on the
on the
delay.
modulation,
And that's
okay.
that's about what I use a lot. And there's a chorus there, which I was showing you earlier. But that's more. It sounds more like an 80s sound or something.
Yeah.
And it's cooler here. You can just because you get the pure tone of the guitar, and then the delay is just a little bit modulated. I would set it up for an edgier tone. Like I would use just like my twin or a blackface Fender. And that's set up like a. Yeah. And I might use a little of that. Yeah. That's a little heavy for rhythm, but, you know, so I can get the.
So there, you're just pushing your front end of your amp then with the
Yeah, push
booster.
the front end of it.
Okay.
Now I might put a slap on it, a mono slap. That's a country tone there.
Right.
That's more of a Fender.
That sounds
I
like
got
a-
off of the Marshall and went to that.
To the twin cabinet.
The twin, I'm using this Showman head, and I'm barreling it with a 1/4-inch barrel, using the speakers out of it because it just sounds so good out of that thing. Yeah, I'm bringing home good news.